Hi, and welcome back to Plastic Models by Regular Dude and the M10 Tank Destroyer project for the beginner series, building a model from a photograph. So I've got the hull here. It's been painted, and I put a clear coat on it in preparation for decals and weathering. But first, one more part I have to install before I get to that is the hedgerow device. So this is from Tank Workshop, or Tank's Workshop, whatever it's called. It's resin. It comes with these parts here, the main hedgerow cutter, this part here, which I have no idea what it is, and then the mounting brackets themselves. So the first thing I want to do is to cut this from the pouring block here, and it needs to be cut along this back edge. So using an X-Acto saw or any other small fine saw, I'm going to line it up against the back and begin to cut it. And I'm just going to give this quick caution thing. Oftentimes, and I agree, this creates a lot of dust, and apparently resin dust is going to kill you or something. So make sure that maybe you wear a breath mask, a dust mask, or something like that. Whether or not it really will cause that much damage any more than most other kind of dust we breathe at our desk, I don't know, but better to err on the side of caution. So what I'm going to do, because I'm going to cut this over on the edge of my desk top because I need some room. Move my camera here. And then basically I'm going to put this on the edge of my desk and carefully cut. Now you want to cut it as cleanly as possible, and the reason I'm doing it like this is that it gives me a pretty straight cut. But there's going to be some sanding afterwards. So I'm going to cut this right here, and then I will come back to do the sanding. Okay, I have got the hedgerow device installed, and basically all I did, once I got it cut off, using a piece of sandpaper laid on a flat hard surface, not this flexible mat here, I sanded it smooth. The back of this, as well as the mounting brackets. So once I got that done, then all I did was I lined it up and used the old gel super glue and glued it in place. Then I painted it, and as you might be able to see in the on the screen here, this is a little bit different color than the hull is, and the reason I did that is I wanted to make it look like it was something that was added later. I didn't want it to be the exact same color. Now granted, most of this is going to be covered up by sandbags and some shrubbery stuck over here, and then a lot of dirt and mud and stuff, but I thought that might add a bit of realism to it. So now that I have that mounted, pretty much everything is mounted that needs to be, except for the bogies and stuff, but I'm going to do those after. I can start working on the weathering. So the first thing I want to do is I want to do some wash to bring out some of the details and highlights and stuff. And I use black, but in this I'm going to give this a shot here real quick and see how it works. And again, I'm using the 502 Abteilung model oil color. I'm using brown wash in this one. So I've got some mixed up here, just using some their brand of odorless thinner, and I'm not convinced that this is any better than the brand I use for my local hobby retailer. So I'm just going to use what I have in that bottle, save that, and then once I empty this, then I'll refill it with the other, just, you know, to have a more convenient sized bottle on the table here. So I've got this all mixed up. I may have to add a little bit more oil to it. As a matter of fact, I'm just about positive, because I like my washes to actually be visible. So I just use a toothpick or cocktail stick, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're from, and I put that on there like that. And then get it all mixed up good. Then once it's all mixed up, kind of checking on the side, looks okay. So what I'll do is, just to test it, I'll try it on the bottom here and see how it looks, because I do want it to be visible. And it looks pretty good. I don't think it's diluted too much. And one thing, I've talked about it before when I've used this, is I really like the fact that it's really, the pigments they use on this stuff is really finely ground, so it really mixes well with the thinner. There's not any grit left. Not that that's ever really been a problem, but it does work really well. Now, one other thing I've done is, after I painted it, I had it pretty much ready to go. I used a clear coat, and I used Tester's clear coat in the aerosol can to spray a clear coat on here. And the reason I do that, and there's a lot of people who, you know, this is one of those things, it's kind of, I'm going to have to say it's kind of personal preference. There's a lot of people that don't use a clear coat when they're doing this kind of stuff, but I have found that on the Tamiya brand paints, it is so flat that when I touch my brush to the spot I want to do the wash, basically it just diffuses it. It doesn't really flow down and accumulate in the edges and the spots where I want it to be. It just kind of diffuses and spreads out over the things where it's hardly visible at all. And I found that I can overcome that by spraying with a clear, thereby sealing up that ultra flatness, because you can see it's still not real glossy. It's kind of almost a eggshell semi-gloss kind of thing, maybe not even as much as a semi-gloss, but it's enough that the wash behaves the way I want it to. So, you know, personal preference, a lot of people think it's just wasted time, unnecessary. And it might be with other brands of paint. I find I don't have that problem when I use, say, Vallejo paints, because the finish on it isn't as flat. But in this case, that's what I do. So, you know, you just kind of have to experiment and see what works. And this seems to work pretty well for me. So what I'm going to do, this is practice stuff on the bottom just to make sure that it's going to look the way I want it to once it dries. So I'm going to let this set up for a few minutes, take a look at it, and see if it's going to meet my stringent requirements. I'm being facetious. But it does look pretty good like this. So I'm going to let this set up a little bit and dry, let the thinner evaporate, and see what it looks like, and then come back and determine if I want to darken it up with a little bit of black or the dark mud color or whatever. After messing with the washes that I practiced on the bottom, I have moved further on. I decided to just skip going through each and every aspect of the weathering process, because I've done that in other videos. And I want to get moving on this thing. So I did the wash. I did end up adding a little bit of black to it. Once I did the wash, then I got the Vallejo pigment, light sienna color, mixed me up a batch of mud and applied it. Once I did that, I used the dark mud color from 502 Abtalon and made a wash and went over the mud to tone it down and make it a little bit darker. Then using Tamiya X22 clear gloss, I applied that to the lower portions of the suspension and on the inside to give it a wet look, because from the photo the vehicle is traveling through a river, so the running gear and everything would be kind of wet with the dryer mud up, in the upper portions of the bogies and splashed up on the sides. Now I'm going to add some more splashed up mud, but that's going to come later after I get some more of this construction done, because I want it to be splattered over top of some of the stuff I'm doing. So I worked on the sandbags, and the sandbags, if you will remember correctly, are from Value Gear, and they're just resin sandbags. And as you can see, they're all flat on one side, so they're not really conformed to anything except to lay flat. So what I did is I used some hot, I boiled some water, and I dropped some of these into the water to soften them up, and I was able to bend them to form to some of the contours on the hedgerow device in the front, as you can see here. So after I got the ones in place that I want, I painted them. And then for this gap right here, there's a bit of a gap. It was kind of tricky to get in there. I'm going to be adding some mud to that, so I'm going to pack in a little bit of mud made out of the Vallejo pigment to kind of splatter that up and to kind of fill it in. And I've already got a coat of paint on here, and I already did one wash, and I'll be doing another with a little bit darker color. So that's where the hull sits. So I got that done. I got some more of the weathering done, and the only thing I did different than I normally do on the weathering is I made it a little bit streakier, and I accomplished that with using the Ultimate Weathering Wash. I used mud and light dirt. So the mud is more of a brown color. The light dirt is kind of a light, dusty, dirty color. I've used it before on other vehicles and aircraft as well. So what I did is I just kind of streaked it on there and left it, let it dry, and then used a stiff brush, being this one right here, and then just dragged it across to remove the harsh edges and to kind of blend it in to the surface of the vehicle. Then I added the mud color, which is the browner color, and I did the same thing just to give it some variation. I did the same thing on the turret, just not quite as much, seeing as how it's higher up from the ground. So I've got that part done. So I figured at this point I'd better start working on some of the accessories. So as I've shown earlier, I already have some of the fuel cans. These are US jerry cans. Then I have some German jerry cans that I'm going to use as well, because in the photograph that I'm using for reference, there are German jerry cans in the racks on the back of the vehicle. So I did those. I've got a drum here. I think these were water containers. Don't know. Doesn't really matter. It's going to go on there. And then the next thing I need to work on is I'll show you on the photograph here that I'm working from. I need to start working on the tarps and stuff. Now, these bags here I've got from a Tamiya set, so all I have to do is paint those. They won't be identical to these, but they'll look a lot like it. But these tarps here are what I'm working on now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you real quick what they look like after they're done. Now, obviously, they're just white right now, but once they're dry, because they are wet, I will be painting them. Okay, so I've got 2 of those made, so I'm going to show you real quick how I actually do that. So what you need is just some tissue paper, like people use to put in gift bags. It's pretty tough, but it's really smooth, so you don't get any weird textures going on, but there is a little bit of texture to allow the paint to grab and dry brushing and all that. And then you just cut it into pieces. Doesn't really matter what size pieces you use. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to use this piece just like it is. So what I do is I put it in a paper plate, and then now some people use a mixture of water with white glue in it. I am just using water. The reason being is I don't want it to stick very much to this. And I think once it dries, because of the whatever goop they put in wood pulp to make it into paper, it's got a little bit of adhesive quality to itself. So I'm going to see how that works. So basically what I do is I just take some water, I just pour it in here like this, and then I just roll it around. If it folds over, just grab it, flip it, whoops. Have a paper towel handy, because you're going to need it. And I just roll it around and get the tissue all soaked, thusly. And then once it is all, if you get any corners, you can just use your knife. This stuff is surprisingly tough, even when it's wet. It's not like a Kleenex or, facial tissue or bathroom tissue, anything like that. It's actually pretty tough, so it can take a little bit of work. So don't be afraid to push it around if you have to to get it uncrinkled. And then I just take a paper towel or kitchen towel, depending on where you're from, and I just kind of force all of the excess to one side of this plate here, because you don't want it too wet. Just kind of dab it off. Like that. Then, and I'm using white because that's what I had. It was either white or pink or red. So I'm thinking that white would be the easiest to paint, so that's why I'm using it. Now, if you had like a green or maybe even a yellow or some other color, it'd probably be okay. It'd be easier to see on the plate, or use a different color plate, whatever, but it's alright. So then what you do is you just kind of bring it over and keep the edges as even as you can. Don't worry if it's wrinkly, because this is a tarp, and these guys weren't real particular when they folded them up, I don't think. Just bring that over like that. I want this one to be about, this is just to give it some thickness. Now you don't want the edges to extend beyond, because you want it to look like it's been rolled up. So then once you get it to the width you want, then you just start it pretty tight in the middle. Again, it's not an exact science. And just roll it up. Trying to move my fingers here so you can see what I'm doing. And it may squish out some more water. It's alright, just use your paper towel to get the excess off the plate. And then get your seam at the bottom, and then just kind of flatten it out like that. Okay? So once you get that, then you just take some thread. Doesn't really matter. I use this color here because it's appropriate, but it's going to be covered up anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then just put it under the edge. Give yourself plenty of string to work with, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie these, and then once everything is dried and ready for paint, then I'm going to use some tape and cut some straps. So you pull this around and then you pull it kind of tight so you get some wrinkles to add some texture and some interest to it, like that. And then pull that through and tie yourself a little knot. Just a regular square knot will do. Whoops, it's a little long. Just cut those off as short as you can, because you're going to be covering those up and you don't want any ends sticking out. You're going to be covering up with tape. Then do the same thing on that side, and you will end up with this. So then once it's dry, I can paint them and they'll be ready to go. So let these dry up and then get to working with some paint. Okay, after my last segment there, let's take a look at what I've got before I call it quits for this video. I already showed what was going on here. And then let's see, we've got the tarps have been painted. I've got these glued together here. They should be dry. Yeah. So those are glued together. They will be going on the side of the turret with one more smaller one on top, thusly, and roped on there. I got the shells painted on the inside. And just a quick note, I was going to use the Vallejo Old Gold, and hate it. It's horrible paint. Super thick. When you thin it, then it gets translucent. Just not digging it. I mean, gold and silver and stuff like that, bronze, any of that copper, it can all be problematic at best. And in this, I'm sure there's a lot of people that can get it work great, but not me. I'm not one of them. So I went totally old school, went down to the local hobby shop, actual hobby shop, and got a good old-fashioned bottle of Testors metallic gold in the old school little square bottle. One layer, boom, shells are painted. Now, gold might not have been the best color for it, but they didn't have anything brass, and there's going to be figures in the way, so all I have to do is have the appearance of the shells in there. So, what else? Oh, and then I got the fuel cans started painting here, and again, I gotta say that some of this paint, just not that dandy. Now, if I would have sprayed, if I'd have primed them and sprayed them, they would have been fine, but I wanted to try and experiment. There's a lot of people that don't use primer, so I did not use primer on these. It was just the gray plastic from whatever kit these came out of, and I tried 3 different colors. Here is the Vallejo Model Air Dunkelgelb. Okay, the middle one is MIG Dunkelgelb Base, and then this one here is Testors Model Master Acrylic in the Dunkelgelb. And I gotta say that out of the 3, I like the finish on the Model Master the best, which is weird because I haven't used that stuff in a really long time, so kind of like it. So you may be seeing more of that in the future. I'm really getting to where I'm discovering things about paints that work and don't work, and maybe changing some of my lineup some. So anyway, these are painted. I have to put another coat on them, and then those will be ready for a little bit of chipping and weathering to go along with the US jerry cans. And the reason I'm using both types is because in my photo, the cans in the front part of that are lined up on the deck here are actually German jerry cans, and the other ones I can't really tell what they are, so I'm going to do US cans there, and then the other boxes and stuff on that. So anyway, that's what I've got done so far on this. So next time I come back, the next video update on this, I will be weathering I'll begin weathering the tarps. I'll finish painting these and start weathering those, and then those parts will be ready to be attached to the back of the vehicle. Then all I'll really have to mess with is weathering that stuff up a little bit to blend it in with the rest of the vehicle, and then do some tracks. So that's it for this segment of Plastic Models for Beginners, modeling from a photograph. And as always, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions or hints or tips, anything like that, please put them in the comments below, and I will get back to you as quick as I can. So, thanks again for watching Plastic Models by Regular Dude, and I will see you all next time.